Hi, I'm Trisha Morris from Club Scrap. Welcome to the 5x7 Card Caddy Workshop. I hope you're ready to learn a bunch of new things and create a fabulous desktop piece in which you can proudly store your handmade cards. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the Card Caddy itself, and it's made from a complete Club Scrap card kit. So we've adapted all the contents of the box to make the card caddy, the decorative elements on the caddy itself, and then a set of 8 5x7 cards to get a head start on filling that caddy. I would advise that perhaps you observe the making of how this works, then follow along with the video again at your own pace and make the project along with me. As with most Club Scrap projects, we'll begin with a good quality guillotine trimmer. This happens to be my favorite. It's from Fiskars, and we do carry these at Club Scrap. I'm also using an organizer I call an accordion pocket file, and I actually made this myself, and you can make one too. If you're interested, let us know at Club Scrap. We can help you get started with a little kit and video workshop to make your own paper sorting file. If you don't have this, don't let that keep you from making the project. Just maintain 4 separate piles, A, B, C, and D. So for starters, I'm taking if you got the bundle, there will be a card kit in that bundle. And I'm going to remove all of the papers from that. Then from your components kit, you're going to be finding all of that black paper. And let's combine those things, and we're going to sort the paper into the order in which we'll use it. And of course, the first papers that we will trim will be all of the black sheets. So just go ahead and take the entire pile of 5 black 12x12 papers and place that on your trimming base. And then I'm going to take 2 sheets of the blue paper included in that mariachi kit. Next, find the 2 prints that are included. I'm going to put those face down on my work surface. Then take 1 red, 1 gold, 1 green, and 1 black. Next, we'll go red, gold, and green. Those will be the last things we deal with. I'm going to flip those over and then to their plain side, put them on the pile, and then we'll flip the entire pile back up to where we began with that black paper on top, and we are on page 1 of our instructions, step 1. Let's go ahead and just take a sheet of this black paper, and I need you to find the grain direction because eventually this paper will be folded. So to find the grain of this black paper, hold it by an edge and then wiggle it. Hold it by a neighboring edge and wiggle it. Now, which side produces the easiest wiggle? And to me, it's this one, because this is real stiff. The paper wants to bend. So place the paper into the trimmer so that it bends easily from top to bottom, not from left to right, but from the top of the trimmer to the bottom. And let's cut this at 10 1/4. Now, if you're using this trimmer for the first time, remember that 10 1/4 is right here. We're not going to look at those centimeters. We're looking at inches, and you have to go 1 column to the left of the 10 to find 10 1/4. Make sure the paper is nice and square at the top with the guide. Push down on this clear guide before you slice. I'm going to set this aside because we're going to need to score this. This strip that came off the end is a scrap. I'm going to put that in pocket D, where I'm going to keep all the papers I didn't use. Now I'm going to take the next sheet of black, do that same little test, pop it in the trimmer so it dips top to bottom, and the third piece. So this is 2 at a time now. Grain is dipping top to bottom, and we're going to find that measurement again, 10 1/4. Set aside to be scored, and the 2 scraps can go into pocket D. Now, this one's just going to be slightly different. The grain of this 4th sheet of black paper needs to be a dipping top to bottom, and we'll cut at 10 1/4 this time as well. But now we're going to rotate and trim at 6. Set both of these pieces aside to be scored. And there's this little strip here. We're going to make a couple of little cuts here. So we're going to start out at 11 1/4. 10 1/2, and 9 3/4. Now, what was the purpose of that? Well, I just made 3 little pieces, and I'd like to show you where we're headed. These are the little mats for the 3 labels that you'll choose to go on the front of your unit. So we'll just set those aside in a safe place, and then this remaining strip can go in pocket D. Now this time I'm going to take this final piece of black paper, place it in the trimmer so that it dips from left to right. I know, it's a little weird, isn't it? I'm going to cut it at 6 inches and then rotate and cut at 10 1/4. This gets set aside to be scored. And here we have an entire 6x12 sheet that is a scrap. You can use it for something else or incorporate it into your finished cards. And then we have one other small little piece that's a scrap as well. And we're finally moving into colorful land with this beautiful mariachi collection. It's so bright and beautiful. We're not going to be folding this paper, so the grain direction doesn't matter. And I'll place it in the trimmer at 11 1/2 and then 7 1/4. Now rotate, and I'm going to have a little challenge for you. I need you to cut this at 8 7/8. So if you look at your trimming base here, there's 8, there's 9. 7/8 is between 8 3/4 and 9. That little hash mark right there, that's 8 7/8. And this is also part of our card caddy, so I'm just going to set it aside. And then this little piece that fell off the end can go in pocket D. The remaining strip, let's trim this at 10 1/2 and 6 1/4. This piece is going to go in pocket A. That's going to be for a set of cards that we'll make. And this other one in pocket B. And now you have the long strip and this little guy that goes in D, because I didn't use it. For this next sheet of blue, we're going to be trimming this into one piece that wraps the base of the caddy, and then that mats the little printed pieces on the front wall. Okay, so the grain direction for this needs to be dipping left to right because we'll be wrapped. We'll trim here at 10 3/4 and 8. Rotate and trim at 11 1/2. Set this aside because we're going to be needing it for the caddy. There is a little scrap that fell off the end there. We can keep that if you want. And now let's trim this strip. This is the wider of the 2 that remain. We'll cut at 8 1/4, 5 1/2, and 2 3/4. What you'll find is a series of 3 squares the same. That's for the caddy. Let's set those aside. And then this piece can go in pocket D. And this last scrap goes in pocket D as well. And now we're at the print. Now we're going to cut this at 7. And the grain direction didn't matter because this paper will not be folded. Rotate. And I'll have you cut at 8 5/8. So this is your last challenge of the day. 8 1/2 is here. 8 5/8 is between 8 1/2 and 8 3/4. A little hash right there. And that's going to be the back panel of our unit. I'll set that aside. Here we have a large scrap. And now we're going to have some fun with this last strip here. Okay, so bear with me. We'll cut at 10 1/2, 9, 6 1/2, and 4. Rotate this piece so it's horizontal, and we're going to make a square. So cut at 4. This will go in pocket B. And then this little end fell off there. Let's throw that in D. Now we have 2 more pieces that are wider and they're the same size. Sometimes when I'm trimming prints, I put them face to face so they don't slide as easily. Let's trim them at the same time at 2 1/2. I'm cutting horizontally. And I just made a series of squares. Now 3 of the squares are going to go on my caddy to decorate it. And the 1 square is an extra scrap. Now we have 2 more thin strips. I'm going to trim them back to back. And we'll cut these at 4 1/2. Both of these go in pocket B. And I would say these scraps can go in the circular file. Some really easy cuts on our next print. Again, the grain direction does not matter. Nothing will be folded. I'll have you trim at 8 and 4. The two of them, because you just made 3 strips the same size. 2 can be trimmed at the same time at 6 inches. So we're just cutting them in half. And they all go in pocket A. And the next one we can trim horizontally at 8 and 4. And these all go in pocket B. We're just making panels for all the cards now. I mean, we're kind of out of the weeds of having to trim for the card caddy, but we're gonna have some fun making cards as well. Now this gorgeous red paper, you can see that has this beautiful stipple texture. It's so pretty. I want the grain dipping top to bottom, and we're gonna cut the gold at the same time. Grain, let's see how that dips so beautifully in that direction. That's what we want. And I have this really clever way of cutting paper from 12 by 12 into 2 5 by 7 cards, which is kind of a cool thing. So I'm cutting at 7, both sheets at the same time. Then rotate. We'll cut at 11 3/4 and 10. Set these aside to be scored. And then we have this strip right here. I'm going to have you cut this horizontally at 4 3/4. Place these little strips in pocket B. This is a scrap. And believe it or not, this little guy, I used it on card set A. So I'm just going to pop that in there. And then these 2 pieces get set aside to be scored. Let's repeat that. We're going to get a little practice. So check your grain direction, top to bottom for the green, and top to bottom for the black. And let's repeat that whole thing. So we're just going to trim at 7, rotate 11 3/4, and 10. Set this aside to be scored. This strip will trim horizontally at 4 3/4, pocket B. A scrap, and this strip, pocket A, along with, like, I think there might be some others there. Yeah, A. Okay, and then this piece, we'll score it later. Forgot to file this red one here too. That's it for those cards. Now we get to take 2 more sheets. The grain direction won't matter, so I'm going to take the red and the gold, and we'll cut at 11 1/2 and 6 3/4. Rotate and trim at 9 1/2 and 4 3/4. All right, all of the pieces we created from that strip go in pocket A. Then the next one we'll trim again at 9 1/2 and 4 3/4. All of the pieces that we made from that section go in pocket B. This is a set of scraps for D. And we've arrived at our final sheet of plain green paper here. We'll cut at 10 1/2 and 6 1/4. Rotate, trim at 8 1/2 and 4 1/4. Gather up all of the pieces you created, and that's pocket A. This remaining wide strip here will go 10 1/2 and 6 1/4. This panel goes in A. The square goes in pocket B. And there was this little scrap that fell off the end for D. And finally, this last piece will trim at 9 and 4 1/2. These 2 that are the same, it's going to be a shorty here. The 2 the same go in B, and then this last square rectangle was not used. These are the card kit cut aparts for the 5 by 7 card caddy with all the required adaptations. Let's begin by removing the paper from the outside edges of the sheet by using those little crosshair guides. And that's going to be about 1/8 of an inch from each edge gets removed. So I work my way around the entire print until all of those little edges are gone. And that should take me down to a perfect 12 by 12 piece of paper. I want to begin trimming this with the guitars on the right edge. And our first cut's at 11 1/2. We're basically going to be separating each art element. Then 8 1/4 and 4 1/4. rotate and trim at 10.5, 9, 6, and 3. All of the pieces from that strip, even the little guy from the end, they all go in pocket A. This next strip will trim horizontally, so it should say if you stumble. That should be right here. We'll trim at 9, 6 3/4, and you'll go through the guitar, 4.5, and 2 1/4. Once again, going through the guitar. Everything from this row goes in pocket A as well. The next strip will cut at 11, 8 1/4, 5.5, 2 3/4. Everything from this strip except the little guy goes in B, and you can put him in D just in case you decide to use him later. And this last strip can go in D as well. Now I will remove the outer perimeter of the second sheet of these cut aparts by just following those little trimming guides on the edge. Now I have this 12 by 12, so my first cut here will be at 11.5. And then kind of a weird measurement at 10 5/8. Next, 7 1/4 and 5 1/4. Rotate, cut at 10.5 and 9. Now going through the guitar at 6 3/4, 4.5, and 2 1/4. The 4 longer pieces go in pocket B, and then these 2 little strips here we're going to trim at the same time at 4 1/4, and those go in pocket A. The little guitars, you can put those in D if you want to use those, you certainly can. Now this next strip, I'm going to place it into the trimmer with the black Hola on the left, and we'll trim at 10.5, 9, 7.5, 6, 4.5, 3, 1.5. Now let's get these taken care of here. We're not using the Hola, but you can. The next 2 will go in pocket A. Not use, oh, actually this blue one as well. The blue guitar, A. Didn't use the black one. Didn't use this one. And this last row is pocket A. And then that last blue one is a scrap. So those can go in D. I didn't use anything from this strip. You certainly could trim it if you would like. And then now I'm going to take this piece and place it in the trimmer with the guitars on the left. We'll cut at 10 1/4, 8.5, 7, and 5.5. These little guys, these little sentiments are all used in set B, and then the remaining little decorative elements, those would have been scraps, but we've added art to them. That can go in D. I'm going to get rid of my trimmer and grab my score pal. Now these are all the pieces that I've set aside, so I'm going to tackle them in the order they landed. We're going to start out with this long piece here. It's 12 inches long and it's 5 inches wide. So this piece we're going to score at 7. And there should be 3 more like it. Even if you have to dig a little, go ahead and find all the 5 by 12s and we'll score them. Now if you think there is a right side to this texture, make sure you score while it's right side up. And these are all of the card bases for set B, so I'm going to put those in the B pocket. Next there should be a series of 7 by 10s. So the 7 by 10 score horizontally at 5. I like to use the large tip of a ball tip stylus. Again, I'm scoring at 5. And these are the pieces required for card set A. The remaining pieces that are colored or printed are decorative and can be set aside. And we're left with a series of 3 small black pieces and 3 large black that need to be scored. We'll begin with the large piece, We'll start out with this piece in the trimmer horizontally. So it should be 12 inches at the top. We'll score at 3, 8.5, and 11.5. Now, I want you to rotate this piece, and this is important. Rotate it clockwise. So the way the clock hands move, right? And I will score at 2 3/4. There, that's 1. We need to repeat that for the other 2 large pieces. So again, we'll begin horizontally, score at 3, score at 8.5, and 11.5. Then rotate clockwise, score at 2 3/4. One more time, so you're going to get a lot of practice on this. Let's score horizontally at 3, 8.5, and 11.5. Clockwise rotation, so it's vertical. Score at 2 3/4. Okay, now all we have left to score are the smaller pieces that we'd set aside. For this one, we'll place it in vertically, so it should read 6 inches right here, but we'll score at 5.5. Rotate clockwise and score at 2 3/4. We get to do that 3 times. So vertical at 5.5, rotate clockwise, score at 2 3/4. Vertically at 5.5, rotate clockwise, score at 2 3/4. And now I can get rid of my score pal. Now I've gathered a few important supplies here. You'll need scissors, a pencil. I'm going to use a craft knife with a nice sharp blade that really makes a big difference. I have a bone folder, my 3x14 grid ruler, really helpful, a cutting mat, is our bookbinding glue. I've got it in the bottle, and a needle tip applicator. We'll be making 3 of these compartments, but the steps to make each compartment is exactly the same. So I'll do it once, and then off camera, I'll do the other 2 so that we don't take up too much of our time with repetitive tasks. On page 4 of your instructions, I have a picture of our desired end work here, and the orientation that you do this is extremely important. So make sure you're working with the indentation of the score lines facing up. Again, it's kind of hard to see because it's a black sheet of paper. I've got that narrow strip, that narrow score line here. These are my vertical score lines and my horizontal score lines. So job 1 is we'll start easy, right? Let's go ahead and take our scissors and cut along the left edge of that divot in our score, and then along the right edge of the divot to basically remove the line itself. And then I'm stopping with my scissors the minute I get to the intersecting score line, and then I'm just gonna remove that. Okay, so now I've created like a little square tab. Now, there's another vertical line. I'm gonna do the same treatment. So I'm gonna go left of the line and right of the line. And pull that out. I get to do the same thing here, but this time I'm basically going to cut just to the left of the divot. And I'm going to come at it from this angle and remove the corner just above that score line. So the score line's gone too. You see this narrow little score line here. I'm going to cut the top corner off at a 45-degree angle. Gone. I think it's safe to say we could repeat that with those remaining 2 pieces, removing those score lines and cutting off the corner on the right and then the top corner at an angle. With that task complete, I'm going to return my initial piece back into its working position. This is always our start so that we can keep the orientation of this consistent. And basically I need to now remove this upper left section here and here, and it probably would be nice and safe for you to mark those areas so that you never lose track of what gets taken out of these pieces, because I'd hate to have you do it on the wrong side, the wrong edge. And then this leaves you free to rotate the paper into a comfortable working position for you. For me, I'm going to rotate the paper so that this X is on the left side. And I need to measure down from the top corner now. This would be the top left corner. I need to measure 4.5 inches. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5 inches. I'm going to make a little mark there. Horizontally here, I'm going to make a cut now from that mark I made to the first score line. And that's where I really like my grid ruler, because then I can make sure that it's level. And maybe I will go ahead and rotate this so it's comfortable. Whatever works for you. Just make sure you don't lose track of where your X marks the spot. This has to go. So I will make a firm pressure on the tip of that to make sure I have actually released the paper. Now this is a nice easy part. All I need to do now is cut at an angle from that score line where I stopped trimming up to the top corner of the paper here where this other score line intersects. So I'll bring my ruler to that intersection and bring it up to the top edge of the paper here where that score line meets the edge. And I'm going to cut at an angle. So firm pressure downward on the ruler, firm pressure downward on the knife. I hold it just like I would a pencil, as if I was writing. That seems to be the best way. So now I have removed that upper left corner of the paper, and that unit is ready to go. I need to repeat that for the remaining 2 pieces. With that done, now I've got my 3 pieces and a nice accurate cut that matches from piece to piece. So the more accurate you are in this, the better your project will look. Next, I'm going to take the remaining 3 pieces that are 6 by 10 1/4. And one thing we need to do is working with the divot side facing up. Now that's little score lines on the right. I'm going to remove this corner as well. So I'm going to cut just to the left of that indentation, and then just above that indentation to remove the corner. And this matches kind of what we did with the other piece. So I'll do that on all 3. And now we need to remove the upper right corner of these pieces. So if you have this placed with that little tab on the right, this corner needs to go on all 3. And I'm marking it so I don't lose track of what needs to go away. It's easy to lose track. And this time, once again, this is the top edge. I need to find out what is 4.5 inches down from the top. So go ahead and mark that 4.5. So now I will cut along that short little tab line from the edge of this scored area to the intersecting score. So it's really just a short little piece, right? Just a little horizontal cut. And then from that score line up to the top corner of the piece. Perfect. Need to repeat that on the remaining 2. And now all 3 pieces are ready to go. Let's make one of the Caddy units together, and that will require one of each size piece. And then you'll notice that there is a bump to every score line on the bottom of each fold. So you need to have those score lines all folded. So flip the paper over from the way we've been working on it, and make sure you fold on all score lines by creasing the paper with the bump of the score line inside the fold. You'll do both the vertical and horizontal direction, and you'll notice when you do these bottom folds that they're harder to make because we're going against the grain. I wanted the long folds going with the grain, which is the case here. I'm going to place this piece in front of me so that those bumps of the score lines are facing up, and then this long tab right here is facing up. And if you need to burnish that, you certainly can. I'm going to be using my bookbinding glue from a needle tip applicator because of the amount of glue that I want to apply to the top of this tab. I just like to squiggle it on, make sure you have good application, but not too much. Now bring in the second piece, and this time I want that tab facing down on the right, and then you get this nice long straight edge with the peak on the left. That tab is pointing down. So this is going to be the inside of the box. And I will lay this edge to edge, peak to peak right here as neatly as I possibly can. You can look down at the bottom of the sheet as well. And then I might have used a little too much glue, so I'm gonna kind of swipe that away a little. And then just kind of be gentle with it at first. I'm gonna open this now and make sure this seals well from the back and doesn't glue anything down where I don't want any adhesive. So maybe I'll just do a little less glue next time. Burnish that, and now I've connected the piece, so now it's long enough to make the entire folio. I wish I could have made this out of one sheet of paper, but that wasn't gonna happen. Okay, so now with this open, do you see I have this little tab right here now? So I'm gonna fold over that tab, and I'll burnish that so it lays really nice and flat. And eventually I'm going to fold this so that this end makes contact with that tab. So that'll come in this way. So first I'll apply some glue to the tab. A little less. And then I'll fold so that I can bring that edge right to it. And I want to align and make sure everything's level. And I'm forming the shape of this rectangular angled box. That's number 1 of our caddy. There we go. Now I have this rectangular shape. Flip it over so we're looking at the bottom, and then I'm going to open up the 2 long flaps and bring in the 2 short flaps. I decided for this model I liked it to be assembled in this order. So I will take some bookbinding glue and I'll put it on both flaps, on the back of both flaps here. You do this at the same time. Works well if you hold your work above your surface here. And then just bring in one of the long flaps and then the other long flap. Burnish it a little. I had a little excess glue there, but it won't matter because you will never see it. And then burnish down into the middle of the box. And there you have the perfect little mini magazine holder. Isn't it cute? Of course, you will go back now and grab your next sheet. Make sure that you have folded on all those score lines, and then start out with this large 1/2 inch flap here on the left, and attach this to it, and then flip it over and bring this little tab over to the other side, and then repeat for the 3rd unit as well. Now that these units are all put together, I'm going to set them aside for now to cure a little bit. And let's take our board that we have. We have this nice size board here, and then the larger of the 2 pieces of blue paper. Now if you look, it's slightly larger than the board itself. Perfect. That's just what we want. And I've got my foam brush ready, and I'll take my bookbinding glue out of my larger bottle, and I'm just gonna go around the board. It's a very thirsty board, so make sure you give it enough adhesive so that it can be distributed well. Notice I'm holding the board off of my work surface to avoid getting glue everywhere. I can still kind of get my fingers wrapped around it, so if your hand is large enough to do that. I am, a pianist, and I can reach 10, almost 11 keys. So maybe I'm at a slight advantage. I don't know. But this is a great way to apply glue to board, holding it off your work surface. Then I'll just visually center this. It doesn't have to be super accurate by any means. Just get it as level on there as you can. Flip it over if you'd like. Give it a nice little burnish with your hands or with a bone folder. Scissors comes in. And we need to remove paper from each corner, but make sure you leave enough paper extending beyond the tip of that board so that you still have enough paper to cover it. I like to cut kind of in a V shape. You could just cut at a straight angle if you wanted as well. Just leave at least 1/8 of an inch paper so you don't end up with a naked corner, as I call it, where you can see the book board. Now we have created 4 tabs. Let's turn those into flaps. So I'd like to take my bone folder, put pressure on the top here, and go from underneath the paper to turn the flap upright at a 90-degree angle. Then just grab it and wrap it the rest of the way by creasing again. So basically you make 2 creases. One that creases the paper along the edge of the board, and then one that wraps it around the top of the board. So this is step 1 with the bone folder, step 2. So give it the old 1-2 on all 4 sides. I like to glue down my long edges first. So I'll put a little bit of glue, not near the corners, but along the edge here, staying away from the corners. And I will spread the glue onto the entire flap. You can see it's a pretty light layer, but because I've trained the paper, it just instantly sticks just as I want it to. And then the other side again, I'll spread the glue onto the flaps. If you need more glue, go ahead and add it. You don't want to be too low on glue, otherwise it won't stick. And it needs to be on the entire surface of that tab, right to the edge. Notice I worked with my board off of the work surface. Now at this point, we have our 2 flaps down, the long flaps. At this point, do you see all that extra paper along the edge of the corner here, just tuck it in. You can use your fingertip, you can use your bone folder tip, but that has to be tucked in, just boom, boom. And then when you test it, when you wrap that around, you've got a beautiful finished corner. Here I am doing it with a bone folder. Just turn the corner in, turn the corner in. I always say it's kind of like wrapping a small gift. When you tuck in the sides of a box that you're wrapping, it's the same exact thing, just on a much smaller scale. Notice I'm holding this off of my work surface while I apply the glue. And then secure the flap. Now that all that paper's tucked in, it looks fabulous. Didn't quite give it enough time here. And then do the other short flap. And burnish that in place if you wish. Now when I added the feet, I added it to this side. This is the bottom, because your units are going to sit on top of the unfinished side. Okay, so flip it over and find your 6 little feet. If you also want to grab your ruler and find the center so that you know where to put the foot in the middle. So we're going to do 1 in each corner and then 1 in the center. I'm going to mark that, just give it a little mark. So this side of your ruler is a 0 center, and this side goes from 0 to 14. So I love to use this for projects like this. Now, here's the funny thing. I found it works best to put the glue on the paper. So I'm just going to put a dab in each corner. And you can look at the bottom, you know how big the button is. And then a dab at my marked center here. There. Now, it seems to work great to just place these on top on the glue. So this is, rather than putting glue onto the wood foot, you could spray paint these. You could paint them with black acrylic if you wanted to. It'd be really, really sweet. I think this elevates the project to a whole level, including those 6 feet really made a big difference. Okay, now we're back, setting that aside carefully to dry. I'm going to glue these together side by side. You can use the applicator size glue to get these together. Notice I went with the perimeter and then just a squiggle in the middle and set it down and bond it. So you don't even really need to brush anything out. And since these are handmade, it might be just a little less than perfect, but pretty close if you ask me. Satisfactorily close. I'll go with that. And then I'm going to apply, if you have accidentally gotten glue on one of your walls, this is a great time to decide what piece goes where. If you need to hide any imperfections, this is the time to do it. Because I was careful during that measuring and angle cutting process, these almost do look machine made, which is pretty cool. Turned out really nice. We can nest these little printed squares onto the blue squares. And you can either use your regular 2-sided adhesive or the bookbinding glue for this. It doesn't really matter. Now remember earlier when I had you trim those little black pieces and had you set them aside? This is where your little label is going to go. So once again, you can use your grid ruler. This is just a much more comfortable position to work in. Finding the center, let's see it. That would be at 1 3/8 from each edge. And then 7/8 from center if you want to go like a half down from the top. And I will go ahead and add my black mat to this. And that way I can do it consistently on each piece so that I don't have to try to do it when it's sitting on the unit itself. It's just going to be a little bit easier to center that up nicely. I can apply glue to the back of the square and center it onto the front of each compartment. Boy, it's looking great. Now let's flip it over to this side. And you have 2 more pieces that we prepared. This print, you can put adhesive on the back. And nest it onto the blue, centered. We'll just do a little trial run here. Perfect. So I'll apply glue to the back of this and center it onto the back of all 3 compartments. That'll help stabilize these compartments as well. By now, our base feet are dry and secure, and I'll flip it back over to the top. So when you apply this to the base, just make sure you have an equal margin on all sides. For this, I'll probably just use some of the big glue, since it's just got to make a lot of contact points on an uneven surface here. And then I'll center it up onto my base. Again, remember, you're going to the wrong side of the board, or the exposed board area. Because I used a liquid glue, it allows a little bit of time to adjust. And I want to make sure I look at this on all 3 sides to get it as level on there as possible before that glue sets. And then you can burnish them down from the inside. Now you've got to decide what categories you want here for your labels, and I have included labels. Place the piece horizontally in your trimmer with the instructions on the left, and then birthday should be on your right. And I'm going to cut every 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut it 7.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 3, 2.5, 2, and 1.5 will be the last one. I tried to get as many categories as I could onto this label sheet. All you have to do is choose what categories you want to feature in this particular caddy, and you have more labels for other caddies as well. Let's do miscellaneous, birthday, and thinking of you. All you need to do is apply some adhesive to these, and you can center them onto your black mats, and they should fit on there perfectly. Beautiful. Now we don't have much time left, but what's really cool is that everything is done to make these bonus cards. Let me just give you an idea of how this works. I'm going to empty everything from pocket A. It's kind of a mess, but if you just organize the contents of the pocket by size, that will get you off to a good start. Then take the largest pieces that you've scored and bury the bump of each score line so that you're folding the card base in half. Then consult your instructions to figure out what the base of each card is, and start dealing out the appropriate trimmed panels onto the bases. Once every piece from the pocket has found a home on either the outside or inside of the card base, you can go back and study the instructions again to find out what was done to finish those cards, what embellishments from the kit were used, like the ribbon or the sunburst sequins or the self-adhesive red banner stickers. This is how we do it every month at Club Scrap with our card kits. Until you're ready to assemble, you can take all the pieces that you've sorted out and just place them inside one of your 5x7 envelopes to keep them until you're ready to do all that final work. And then we can empty pocket B and organize those things. Fold all those card bases along the score line by burying the bump on the inside of the fold. That will create a shorter card flap. Then deal out all of your sorted pieces according to the pictures and the instructions. And once all of those pieces are distributed, you will need to just trim off the top and bottom edges of the inner sentiments to make them fit. You know, again, we are retrofitting one of our custom card kits. And then once you incorporate the remaining little embellishments and elements from the kit to decorate your cards, they'll be done. Super cute with ribbon, that banner sticker attached. We've got the tags that were included in the kit, and then the sentiment on the inside with a decorated short flap on the right edge. This is a really clever formula you can use again and again with papers you already have in your stash. So speaking of, this entire project was made with Club Scrap's Gossamer card kit and the component set, which again includes the feet and the boards, the black paper, and then use the rest of the papers in that kit to make my set of 5x7 cards using the same formula. And again, the caddy comes with your envelopes that you need in order to finish up those cards, so you can send them out as well. Nothing more frustrating than not having the envelope to send a card. Now, I know I'm very guilty of packing a whole lot into these little virtual workshops, but that's intentional. I know that you want to grow and challenge yourself to become a better, more proficient crafter, and that's what we're all about here at Club Scrap. If you enjoyed what you learned today and want to learn more, think about becoming a member of the Club Scrap family by joining either our Page Kit or Card Kit Club. It's only $24.95 a month. It's a great value, and it always includes a video workshop where I will walk you through the finishing steps of every project.